When 15 top engineers failed to fix a $1 million machine, a quiet delivery driver stepped forward, and what he did next shocked everyone. Marcus James lived a quiet and simple life in Atlanta, Georgia. He wasn't famous, and he didn't have a big job title or a flashy car. He worked as a delivery driver for a local parts supply company, driving his box truck through the busy streets of the city every day. Those people who met him would probably describe him as polite, on time, and maybe a little quiet. They had no idea what kind of mind he really had. Marcus had grown up in a tough neighborhood on the south side of Atlanta. His mother, Carla James, had raised him and his younger sister on her own. She worked long hours as a nurse's assistant and came home exhausted, but she always found time to make sure her children stayed in school and away from trouble. Marcus loved his mother deeply. He watched how hard she worked and how little she complained, and that made him determined to do something with his life. In high school, Marcus was known for being one of the smartest kids in the room. He was quiet, yes, but when it came to math and science, his teachers would always talk about how sharp he was. He had a way of solving problems that others couldn't. One of his teachers, Mr. Tolliver, used to say, "Marcus doesn't just solve equations, he understands how the whole machine works." Marcus wanted to become an engineer, maybe even work for a big tech company one day. He dreamed of designing machines, solving real-world problems, and building things that mattered. But life doesn't always follow the path you plan. During his senior year of high school, his mother got seriously ill. The doctors said it was a rare autoimmune condition, and she needed constant care. Marcus had just gotten accepted into a good engineering program with a small scholarship. But when he saw the medical bills and how tired his mother looked, he knew what he had to do. He turned down the college offer, got a commercial driving license, and started working full-time to support his family. At first, it hurt. He watched his friends move away to college, start new lives, and follow their dreams while he stayed behind. He worked 12-hour shifts, sometimes more, loading and unloading boxes, delivering heavy equipment, driving in rain and traffic, and barely making enough to cover rent and medical bills. But slowly, Marcus found his rhythm, created routines. He figured out the fastest delivery routes using maps and logic, even when GPS got things wrong. He kept a notebook in his van where he wrote down ideas, ways to improve how deliveries were made, small diagrams of machines he saw during pickups, even sketches of devices he imagined in his mind. He didn't have a degree, but his brain never stopped working like an engineer. Sometimes, while waiting at warehouses or factories for a delivery to be signed off, Marcus would ask the workers questions. He'd watch machines working on the assembly lines and try to understand how everything moved. Most people ignored him or thought he was just being nosy, but occasionally, someone would explain how the machine worked. Marcus loved it. He listened carefully, and often he would point out things they hadn't noticed, like when a motor belt was misaligned, or when a sensor light seemed delayed. One time, at a small manufacturing plant, he noticed a strange vibration in one of the robotic arms while dropping off parts. He casually mentioned it to the technician there. The technician smiled and said, "That's just how it runs." A week later, the machine broke down due to a loose bolt exactly where Marcus had said something felt off. The manager joked, "Maybe we should hire you instead of these techs," but it was just a joke. No one really thought a delivery guy could know so much. At home, Marcus continued to study on his own. He watched online engineering courses, read manuals, and followed machine repair videos late into the night. He didn't have the money or time to go to college, but he taught himself. Every time something broke in his van, whether it was the brakes, the fuel injector, or the SI, Marcus fixed it himself. His coworkers called him the human toolbox. They'd bring their broken radios, busted generators, and even a malfunctioning drone to him, and Marcus would bring them back to life. Still, no one saw him as anything more than a smart driver. Even Marcus himself had begun to believe that this was the best he could hope for. He wasn't bitter about it, believed in hard work and doing your job well, and he took pride in being someone people could count on. But somewhere deep inside, he still carried that small spark, the dream he once had of solving big problems, of being someone who made a difference in the world through his ideas. One afternoon, Marcus was stuck in traffic, sipping cold coffee and listening to a podcast about artificial intelligence in manufacturing. The speaker was talking about sensor delays and automated conveyor belts, and how timing was everything in robotic production lines. Marcus sat up straight. The voice continued, "A sensor off by even a tenth of a second can cause massive inefficiency." He rewound the episode and listened again, and he took out his notebook and began to write. His mind lit up like fireworks. Ideas flew across the page's sensor calibration systems. Timing, sequence diagrams, logic checks. He wasn't just listening. He was building new solutions in his head. It was exciting, but also a little frustrating. Who would listen to him? He didn't have a fancy job title or a degree. If he walked into a room full of engineers, no one would take him seriously. He was just a delivery driver with grease on his hands and dust on his boots. But that didn't stop him from dreaming. Over the next few months, Marcus started noticing more things at the different facilities he delivered to. A lot of them were using new robotic systems, and several were having small glitches that slowed production. Marcus would stand quietly and observe. He saw patterns, identified causes that others missed, and stored it all in his mind. He wanted to help. He wanted to say something, but he kept quiet. People didn't like to be corrected by someone they thought was beneath them. He knew how that went. He learned the hard way that speaking up could get you labeled as a troublemaker. Still, he kept writing in that notebook. Page after page of thoughts, ideas, drawings, and questions. His hands were rough from driving and lifting, but his mind stayed sharp. It was like he was building a secret blueprint for a life that hadn't happened yet. Then, one morning, everything changed. He was assigned to deliver a shipment of precision sensors and replacement machine parts to the Grayson Robotics plant, one of the biggest automation companies in the state. The plant was massive, and getting inside required badge checks, security clearance, and multiple dock inspections. When Marcus finally arrived at the dock, he saw confusion and panic all around. Workers were rushing back and forth. People were arguing. A group of engineers stood near a conveyor belt that had stopped moving. Lights were blinking. Warning alarms were beeping. Marcus waited patiently for someone to sign for the delivery, but no one paid attention to him. So he did what he always did. He watched, studied the machine, the movement of the belts, the sensors, the blinking lights. Something didn't look right. Something was out of sync. As he stood there, a technician walked past and muttered, 15 engineers and not one damn clue what's wrong with it? That made Marcus pause. He looked closer at the timing between the sensor activation and the belt movement. He noticed that the sensor's response was slightly delayed, just a fraction of a second, but enough to cause a jam every few minutes. He tilted his head, thought for a moment, and quietly said to the technician, "I think your sensor's picking up the trigger too late. Might be a misalignment." The technician rolled his eyes.
"Thanks, man.
"I think we got it." Then he walked away. Marcus sighed and turned back to his van, but just as he was about to leave, a voice called out from behind him. "Wait, what did you say about the sensor?" He turned around. It was the plant manager. Her arms were crossed, and she looked both exhausted and curious. Marcus repeated what he'd seen. The manager frowned, walked over to the engineers, and whispered something. They looked skeptical, but one of them made a quick adjustment. The machine started working again. Smooth, clean, no delay, no jam. Everyone stared. No one said a word for a moment. Then the manager slowly turned to Marcus and said, "How did you know that?" And that was the moment, the quiet beginning of something big. Marcus didn't know it yet, but everything he'd been building in his mind, all those years of quiet observation, self-study, and hidden brilliance, were about to be seen for the UH. Very first time, the man everyone thought was just a delivery driver had just done what a room full of experts couldn't, and nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The day Marcus returned home from the Grayson Robotics plant, his head was full of thoughts. Kept remembering how the conveyor belt had suddenly started working after his small suggestion. He didn't want to make a big deal out of it. Maybe it was just luck. Maybe someone else would have figured it out in a few more minutes. Deep down, he knew what had happened. He had seen something that a room full of engineers had misstand. That feeling stayed with him all evening. But Marcus didn't tell anyone. Not his mother. Not his co-workers. Not even his best friend, Leon, who usually knew everything about him, kept it all inside. He wasn't the type to brag or show off. Besides, nothing had really changed. He was still the same guy, still. Had a long delivery route the next morning, still had bills to pay. What he didn't know was that things were already starting to change at Grayson Robotics. Inside the plant, the mood had shifted. After Marcus left, the engineers had gone over his suggestion again. They ran more tests, checked the data, and reviewed the system logs. It became clear that the issue had been going on for weeks. The sensors on the conveyor line were indeed out of sync with the robotic arms. It was a small timing error, something that looked invisible to the eye, but had huge effects on the machines. The delay was just a fraction of a second, but it was causing items on the belt to shift, jam, and sometimes fall off. Production was down, deadlines were being missed, clients were getting angry. The company had already lost over $1 million. Trying to fix the issue, 15 engineers had been working on it. It tried software updates, hardware replacements, rewiring, and more. Some had suggested replacing the entire sensor system, which would take weeks and cost even more. No one had thought to look at the simple timing alignment the way Marcus had. After the manager explained how the problem had been solved, the head engineer, Dr. Liu, was shocked. "Who told you that?" he asked. When she said it came from a delivery driver, he didn't believe it at first. But when he saw the adjustments had actually worked, he said something that stuck in everyone's mind. "That guy isn't just a delivery driver. That guy's a natural engineer," the manager agreed. She remembered Marcus's calm confidence, the way he had noticed the problem without any tools or software, just by watching. She pulled up the delivery records and found his name. Marcus. "James," she said aloud, "we need to find him." The next day, while Marcus was unloading boxes at another warehouse, he got a phone call from a number he didn't recognize. He ignored it. Then it rang again and again. On the fourth call, he picked up, double quotes, "Mr. Marcus James," the voice said. "This is Evelyn Banks from Grayson Robotics. Our team would like to invite you back to the plant." Marcus thought it was a mistake. "You mean for another delivery?" "No," she said, "not a delivery. We want you to meet with our engineering team." Marcus stood still for a moment, the phone pressed to his ear. He didn't know what to say. He was wearing old work boots, a t-shirt with grease stains, and had just finished lifting 20 heavy boxes. No one had ever asked him to speak with engineers before. That weekend, he went back to the plant not as a delivery driver, but as a guest. Out. He walked through the same gates, but this time a security guard greeted him by name. He was taken to a conference room where several people were waiting. Some of them were engineers, some were company leaders. They all wanted to know the same thing. How did Marcus figure out what was wrong? Marcus was nervous at first. He wasn't used to speaking in meetings or explaining his thoughts in front of people in suits. But once they started asking about machines, something inside him clicked. He talked about sensor delays, motor timing, feedback loops, and error margins. He even pulled out a small notebook from his backpack and showed them diagrams he had drawn. The engineers leaned forward in their chairs. Some took notes. Some just watched him with surprise. By the end of the meeting, there was silence. Then one of the engineers said, "I've been doing this for 20 years. That was one of the clearest explanations I've ever heard." The room nodded in agreement. The head of the plant, a man named Mr. Callahan, looked at Marcus and said, "You solved in 10 minutes what our best engineers couldn't fix in a month. That's not normal. That's special." Marcus didn't know what to say. He just smiled and said, "I guess I've seen a lot of machines on the road." The Grayson team offered Marcus a temporary consulting role. It wasn't a full-time job. But they wanted him to come back and look at other issues they were facing. They would pay him more per hour than he had ever made in a whole day of driving. Marcus was stunned. He told them he needed to think about it. That night, he sat in his small apartment, staring at the walls. The TV was off. His dinner sat untouched on the table. He thought about all the years he had spent dreaming, learning, and watching from the sidelines. And now, out of nowhere, someone was finally asking him to step into the game. He said yes. Over the next few weeks, Marcus returned to the Grayson plant several times. Each time, he was asked to look at a different machine or system. And each time, he noticed things that others had missed. He had a gift not just for understanding how things worked, but for seeing the small details that others overlooked. He wasn't faster than everyone else, but he was more curious. He asked the right questions. He thought about how the machines were supposed to feel, not just how they were built. Word spread quickly through the plant. Some engineers were skeptical at first. They didn't like the idea of an outsider being brought in, especially one without a degree. But when they saw how Marcus worked, they couldn't deny the results. Machines that had been running at 80% efficiency were now running at 95%. Downtime was cut in half. Some systems were redesigned completely, based on Marcus's suggestions. Eventually, the Grayson CEO visited the plant to see what all the buzz was about. He met Marcus and watched him explain how a simple adjustment to a motor controller had saved hundreds of man-hours. The CEO was impressed. He asked Marcus if he had ever thought about going back to school. Marcus laughed. Every day, just never had the chance. 2 weeks later, Grayson offered Marcus a full scholarship to attend a nearby technical university.
Ow!
They even offered to pay him part-time while he studied. He could work with their engineers, gain experience, and earn his degree, all at the same time. It felt like a dream. Marcus called his mother that night and told her everything. She cried on the phone. "I always knew you were meant for more," she whispered. "You just needed someone to see it." His best friend Leon didn't believe it at first. Wait. They're paying you to go to college and work with robots? Man, you better buy a suit or something. Marcus didn't buy a suit. He bought a new notebook, a better laptop, and started classes that fall. At the university, he was older than most. Students and his hands were rough from years of work, but he didn't mind. He sat in the front of every class, asked questions, and studied harder than anyone else. He wasn't just there for the degree, he was there because he had waited years for this chance. At Grayson, he became more than just a consultant. The engineers started calling him the sensor whisperer because of his talent for diagnosing timing and alignment problems in robotic systems. He helped redesign an entire production line for a new product, and his ideas saved the company over $500,000 in just 1 quarter. His name started appearing in internal reports, emails, design documents. Some of the same engineers who had doubted him at first now came to him for help. They'd say things like, "Hey Marcus, can you take a look at this model? We think something's off." And he would smile, walk over, and start solving the puzzle one day. A visiting executive from another company toured the plant. After seeing the upgraded systems, he asked, "Which team handled this redesign?" The manager pointed across the room and said, "That guy over there, Marcus James, used to be our delivery driver." The executive blinked in surprise. "You're kidding?" "No," she said. "I'm not. He's the smartest guy in this building." Marcus heard about the comment later. He didn't say much, but when he got home, he opened a fresh page in his notebook and wrote one word at the top: start. Knew this wasn't the end of his journey. It was just the beginning. The morning sun had just started to rise over the city when Marcus pulled his van into the large parking lot of Grayson Robotics once again. But this time, he wasn't there as a delivery driver. He wasn't dropping off packages or waiting for a signature. He was now part of something bigger, something he had never imagined for himself before. His role was still part-time while he studied engineering. But every time he walked into the plant, people greeted him differently. They respected him. Some smiled, some nodded. Others, especially those who had been skeptical at first, now welcomed his advice. Marcus still found it hard to believe that his opinions were being asked in meetings and taken seriously by professionals with years of experience. That particular day, something unusual was happening inside the plant. As he entered, he noticed the usual calm had been replaced by a tense buzz of activity. People were huddled in groups, whispering, looking concerned. The hum of machines seemed to fade into the background as everyone's attention focused on a single production line, the newest and most advanced one in the entire factory. Marcus spotted Evelyn Banks, the plant manager, standing with 2 engineers and looking very worried. When she saw Marcus, She waved him over. Her face was tight with stress. "Marcus," she said quickly, "I'm glad you're here. We've got a serious situation." "What happened?" he asked, already scanning the conveyor system with his eyes. "It's the new AI integrated belt. It's failing." Marcus raised his eyebrows. He knew about this system. It was designed by an external team from California State of the Art. Technology that used machine learning to detect product defects and sort items in real time. It had taken 2 years and a lot of money to build. If it failed now, it would be a disaster. "It started glitching 2 days ago," Evelyn explained. "We called in the original engineers. They've been here nonstop. 15 of them. The best from the design firm. But no one can figure it out." Marcus nodded slowly and walked closer to the conveyor. He noticed that several bins were full of incorrectly sorted items. Some packages were labeled wrong, others completely untouched. The belt would speed up and slow down randomly. Robotic arms meant to pick and place parts were missing their marks. He stood still and watched. He didn't speak for several minutes. The others around him went quiet, almost unconsciously letting him take control of the space. Marcus had a way of observing that made people curious. He didn't rush. He listened to the machines, watched the timing, looked at how the sensors were flashing, and then turned to the side panel. He asked a simple question. "Has anyone checked the feedback loop from the arm sensors back to the AI control unit?" One of the engineers shook his head. "The system is closed loop. It should self-correct." "What if the feedback timing is off?" Marcus replied. "What if the AI is reacting to old data?" The room fell silent. The idea hadn't occurred to anyone. It wasn't something you'd expect unless you'd spent countless hours watching machines fail up close and unless you had a mind that could see inside the rhythm of mechanical systems. The lead engineer, a tall man with glasses, looked skeptical. "That would mean the sensors are sending delayed signals, which doesn't happen in this model." Marcus walked to the terminal and asked for permission to look at the data logs. Evelyn nodded. Within minutes, he pulled up the error reports and found what he was looking for. There, he pointed. "These timestamps don't match the action logs. The delay is 0.28 seconds. The room leaned in. "That small of a delay?" someone asked. "Would that really cause the whole system to fall apart?" Marcus smiled gently. "If you're driving a car and you turn the wheel even a half-second too late, you miss your turn. Same thing here. The robot arms are reacting to images and sensor input that's already outdated by the time they move. That's why they're placing items in the wrong spots." He paused, then added, "You've got a smart brain feeding on old information." People started nodding. One of the engineers typed rapidly on the terminal, adjusting the loop timing and resyncing the control system with real-time sensor feedback. They rebooted the line. Everything moved smoothly. No jerks, no delays. The robotic arms picked up the parts perfectly. The packages moved across the conveyor like a choreographed dance. The plant had been struggling for days, and within 15 minutes, Marcus had fixed it. A slow clap came from the back of the room. It was the chief technical officer who had flown in earlier that day. He walked forward and said, "You just solved what 15 of our top engineers couldn't in 3 days." The room was quiet. Everyone looked at Marcus. Some with awe, some with embarrassment, some with admiration. Evelyn shook her head and muttered under her breath, "So smart, fix it now." And you did. News of the fix spread like wildfire. Reached the executive floors of Grayson Robotics within hours. By the next day, Marcus's name was being mentioned in emails between board members, along with phrases like "rising talent must retain" and "genius-level instincts." But Marcus didn't know all that yet. He just went back to his classes, his part-time work, and his late-night study sessions. What did change, however, was how people began to treat him, not just at the plant, but across the company. Engineers started inviting him to brainstorm sessions. One team asked him to co-lead a redesign for another line. Another team offered to help him build a portfolio so he could patent a few of his original ideas. Marcus, who had once been seen as an outsider, was now becoming a valuable part of the company's inner circle. But not everyone was happy. A few older engineers felt threatened. They had spent decades earning their positions, and now here came a former delivery driver without a degree, making breakthroughs they hadn't even considered. One engineer even said behind closed doors, "We can't let this guy be the face of the solution. It'll make us look bad." But those voices were few, and they were quiet. Most people were too impressed with Marcus's mind to care about titles or ego. He had something you couldn't teach in school-intuition. One afternoon, while working on a robotic welding arm that had been misfiring, Marcus was approached by the head of human resources and a legal advisor. They handed him a thick folder. Marcus looked at them, confused. "What's this?" he asked. "A proposal," the woman said. "We'd like to sponsor you fully, not just school, a formal internship, mentorship. When you graduate, a full-time position on the innovation team." Marcus opened the folder. His hands shook slightly. He had never seen paperwork like this before. His name was on it. His future was in it. It was real. Later that night, he sat on the edge of his bed, holding the folder in his lap. He thought about his mother, who had spent her whole life working hard to keep their family afloat. He thought about all the times he had fixed broken fans, bent wrenches back into shape, studied YouTube tutorials, and stayed up drawing diagrams in his notebook when the rest of the world was asleep. He thought about the boy he used to be, the one who had once dreamed of becoming an engineer, but had pushed those dreams aside because life demanded something else, and now here he was, living the dream he once gave up. The next morning, he signed the papers. It didn't take long before Marcus became known beyond Grayson Robotics. A local newspaper ran a story. "Delivery driver solves $1 million problem in minutes." A few tech blogs picked it up. Ain't. Then a national news outlet reached out for an interview. Microphones came. Microphones reporters asked, "What do you think made you see what others missed?" Marcus, still humble as ever, simply said, "I guess I paid attention."
Wow.
But it wasn't just attention. It was years of quiet learning, hard work, and a mind that never stopped trying to understand the world. After the interview aired, Marcus received hundreds of messages from young people, especially from neighborhoods like the one he grew up in. Some said he inspired them. Others asked for advice. A high school teacher from his old school even emailed to say her students had watched his story in class and clapped when they found out he used to go there. Marcus responded to every single message. He told them the truth that he hadn't taken, a straight path that he had failed sometimes, that he had worked jobs that didn't seem important, and that he had spent years being invisible. But he also told them that their minds mattered, even if no one noticed yet. That being smart wasn't about degrees or offices or titles. It was about curiosity, patience, and courage. And he meant every word, because Marcus knew better than anyone that talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. He had lived through that. Now that his moment had come, he was determined to make it count, not just for himself, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked. The air inside the innovation lab at Grayson Robotics always smelled slightly of metal and oil. Machines clicked softly in the background, computer screens flickered with data, and the quiet hum of electricity filled the room. This place, once out of reach for Marcus James, had now become his second home. The man who used to drop off boxes at the loading dock was now sitting at the heart of the company's most important research center. Still didn't feel real sometimes. Marcus had settled into his role as an intern engineer faster than anyone expected. Though he was still working toward his degree, he was already solving problems that senior engineers struggled with. Every week, someone new from a different department would show up at his desk and ask, "Can I show you something weird with one of our machines?" And Marcus would always say yes, take a look, and usually offer a smart, simple solution that no one had thought of. Even with all the attention, Marcus stayed grounded. He wore the same boots, carried the same notebook, and still helped fix the coffee machine when it broke. One afternoon, while reviewing some prototype designs for a new robotic gripper system, Marcus noticed something odd. The machine was supposed to sort delicate items like glass parts and small sensors without breaking them. But during testing, the failure rate was higher than expected. The robot fingers were too stiff during the first contact with objects, Engineers had tried everything from reducing pressure to adjusting the grip timing, but nothing seemed to fix the issue completely. Marcus watched the videos over and over. Then he said something no one had considered. What if the problem isn't the strength, but the speed of approach? The room went quiet. He explained further.
Think about
How you pick up an egg. You don't just grab it gently. You also slow your hand down as you get close. The robot moves at full speed until the last second. That momentum is causing the shock. It was such a small idea, but it changed everything. The engineers tweaked the code. They made the robotic fingers approach the object slowly during the last inch of movement. The result? The breakage rate dropped by 92%. Everyone was shocked, again, and Marcus just smiled. But his most surprising moment was still ahead. A few weeks later, the company announced that they would be launching a new facility in North Carolina. This plant would be fully automated, designed from scratch with the latest robotics systems. Grayson planned to showcase it as their most advanced facility yet, and they needed a team of engineers to design the machines. Normally, this opportunity would be given to senior staff. But something unexpected happened. Marcus's name was added to the list. When Evelyn told him, Marcus stared at her, confused. Me? Yes, you, she said. You've earned it. Marcus wasn't sure at first. He still felt like a student, still felt like he didn't belong in big boardrooms or design committees. But he knew he had to try. If life was opening a door, he wouldn't stand outside and wonder what could have happened. The next month, he joined the core design team for the new plant. He was the youngest, the least experienced on paper, but it didn't matter. His ideas were sharp, his observations were valuable, and his attitude, calm, focused, team-oriented, earned him respect from even the most experienced engineers. During a key meeting, the team was discussing a layout for a new sensor-guided assembly line. The proposed plan was complicated, filled with multiple layers of control systems and backup circuits. Marcus looked at it quietly for a while, then raised a hand. Why are we using 5 sensors to track one item when we can just use 3 if we place them at angles? The room paused. A few people started doing mental calculations. One senior engineer said, "Wait, that actually reduces the delay time too." Another added, "And it'll save us close to $120,000 in sensor costs." And just like that, the design was changed. Marcus wasn't just part of the team anymore. He was helping lead it. The plant in North Carolina became a fast-track project. Deadlines were tight. The pressure was high. But the energy was exciting. Marcus flew out with the team for site inspections, attended strategy sessions with directors, and even presented his concepts to the company's vice president. He had come a long way from lifting boxes and driving 12-hour routes. And yet, he still never lost the habits he learned from those days, always observing, always listening, always solving. One evening, after a long day of testing new machine protocols, Marcus stayed behind in the lab to make a few changes to a simulation. He was deep in thought, tapping keys and adjusting variables, when a voice interrupted him. "Still working this late?" Marcus turned around. It was Dr. Liu, one of the engineers who had been there the day Marcus first solved the conveyor issue. Back then, Dr. Liu had been skeptical. But now, he was one of Marcus's strongest supporters. "I just had an idea I wanted to test," Marcus replied. Dr. Liu smiled and walked closer. "You know, when I first heard about what you did with that sensor timing fix, I thought it was just luck." Marcus chuckled. "I thought so too. But it wasn't," Dr. Liu said. "You see things differently. It's rare." He paused and added, "You know, some of the engineers were worried at first. They thought you were going to take their place. You didn't. You just helped everyone get better." That moment meant more to Marcus than any paycheck. It was proof that he didn't have to pretend to be someone else to fit in. He just had to keep being himself. Later that night, Marcus walked outside the building. The parking lot was empty. The air was cool. He looked up at the stars and thought about his journey from growing up in a poor neighborhood, fixing things around the house, giving up college, taking care of his mom, driving vans through rain and heat, watching machines break and figuring them out quietly, all the way to standing inside one of the most advanced labs in the country, he smiled. Not because he thought he had reached the top, because he knew this wasn't the end, it was only the middle, back at home. He started working on something personal, a system of machine learning modules that could be used by small factories. With little money to automate basic tasks, most automation tools were built for big companies. Marcus wanted to help the little ones, the kind of places he used to deliver to, where machines were old, budgets were tight, and owners worked day and night to survive. He called it Project Spark. He didn't tell anyone yet. He just wrote code quietly, tested small models, and kept notes in the same notebook he'd always carried. One day, he thought, he would turn Project Spark into something real, something helpful. Weeks passed. The new plant designs were finalized. Marcus returned to Atlanta to continue his studies. His grades were excellent, and his professors had started taking notice of his unusual thinking style. One of them even asked Marcus to speak at a campus seminar about unconventional paths into engineering. At first, Marcus wasn't sure if he should do it. Public speaking made him nervous, but he agreed. On the day of the talk, he stood in front of a room filled with students, some young, some older, many unsure about their futures. Marcus told them his story not to brag, but to show them that success didn't always follow a straight line, that sometimes it came from broken machines, quiet nights, long roads, and hard choices. He told them that no job was small and no person was invisible. After his speech, students lined up to talk to him. One girl said, "I was going to drop out, but now I think I'll stay." Marcus left the campus that day feeling something he hadn't felt before, not just pride, but responsibility. He realized people were looking up to him now, not just as an engineer, but as a symbol of something more, a reminder that hidden talent exists everywhere. He continued his work at Grayson, finished each semester with top grades, and stayed humble through it all. The machines got faster, the systems got smarter, and Marcus, the once unknown delivery driver, now stood at the center of it all, not by accident, but by quiet, steady brilliance. And still, every time a machine made a strange noise, every time a sensor blinked off pattern, every time a robotic arm missed its mark, people would turn to each other and say the same thing: "Better call Marcus." It had been almost 2 years since Marcus James had first stepped into the Grayson Robotics factory as just a delivery driver. At that time, no one had paid much attention to him. He had been wearing an old uniform, carrying boxes, and waiting quietly at the loading dock for someone to sign his delivery papers. Now, he was walking through the main doors of the company's headquarters wearing an ID badge that read, "Marcus James Jr., Innovation Engineer." His story had changed completely, and so had his life by now. Many people at Grayson Robotics and, even outside the company, knew who Marcus was. New interns came in already having heard stories about the delivery guy who fixed the $1 million conveyor. Some thought it was just a legend. Others had seen the news clips or read articles that praised his natural engineering talent, but Marcus didn't let any of that fame go to his head. He still came to work early, still carried the same black notebook he'd always used to sketch ideas and write notes, and he still stayed late when a machine wasn't working right. He never acted like a hero, even though many thought he was one. Marcus had become more than just a good problem solver. He had become a trusted teammate, a mentor to younger engineers, and someone the entire company respected. And not just because he was smart, but because he stayed kind. No matter how big his role got, he never looked down on anyone. He remembered how it felt when people ignored him, when his ideas weren't heard, and when he had to prove himself. Over and over again now, he made sure to listen to everyone, especially the people no one else listened to. One day, a janitor named Mr. Collins came to Marcus during lunch and said, "Hey, I don't know much about machines, but I think one of the arms on line B is acting weird. It sounds different." Marcus didn't laugh or ignore him. He grabbed his tablet and walked straight to line. Be sure enough, the robotic arm was vibrating slightly more than usual. A belt was wearing out faster than expected, something even the system sensors had missed. Marcus fixed it before the problem got worse, and then he went back and thanked Mr. Collins for noticing. That's just the kind of person Marcus was. Meanwhile, something big was happening at Grayson Robotics. The company had been invited to participate in an international tech expo, one of the largest in the world. Companies from across the globe would come to show off their latest inventions, from flying drones to smart factories. Grayson wanted to present its newest robotic control system, a project Marcus had helped design. The system allowed factory robots to talk to each other and adjust tasks in real time. Like a team of workers solving problems together, Marcus's part in the project had been crucial. He had suggested the idea of shared memory between robots, something he'd thought of after watching how people in a kitchen communicate without speaking. Chefs and helpers know what to do by watching each other. Marcus believed robots should work the same way. Engineers had been impressed by the idea. They turned it into real code, and soon it became the foundation of the new system. The expo was going to be held in San Francisco. The company invited Marcus to attend, not just as an observer, but as a speaker. They wanted him to tell his story and explain how someone without a formal background could make such a difference in technology. At first, Marcus felt nervous. He had never spoken to such a large audience before. But after thinking about it, he agreed. He knew his story wasn't just about machines, it was about hope. When the day arrived, Marcus stood on stage wearing a simple button-down shirt and jeans. The room was filled with people, engineers, investors, CEOs, and students. Some probably expected a traditional presentation. But when Marcus started speaking, the room grew quiet, and no one looked away. He didn't use complicated words. He spoke from the heart. Told them about his mother, about leaving school, about driving through the city in an old delivery van. He told them about the machines he watched while waiting for signatures, the notebooks he filled with ideas, and the day he fixed a conveyor belt when no one else could. He told them that the world was full of people like him, people with talent and ideas who just needed someone to give them a chance. When he finished, the room stood up and clapped for a long time. Some people even wiped away tears. After the talk, a young girl walked up to Marcus and said, "My brother didn't finish school, but he's always fixing things. I'm going to tell him about you." Marcus smiled and nodded. That was exactly why he had agreed to speak. After the expo, things moved quickly. Marcus's story was picked up by more news channels. Tech companies from other cities tried to contact him. Colleges asked him to visit and talk to their students. A scholarship foundation reached out, wanting to support more students like Marcus Smart, hardworking and full of potential but unable to afford traditional education. Grayson Robotics, proud of Marcus, gave him a new title, Lead Engineer of Smart Automation Research. It was a dream position. He would now lead a small team of engineers working on future projects, including his own idea, Project Spark. Project Spark had been Marcus's secret passion for a long time. It was a simple idea with a big goal: create low-cost automation tools. For small businesses, he wanted to build robots and software that didn't require a fortune to use. He remembered all the little workshops, mom-and-pop factories, and tiny repair shops he had delivered to over the years, places struggling to stay open because they couldn't afford modern machines. Marcus wanted to help them compete in a world that was changing fast. Grayson agreed to fund the project. Marcus hired a small team of junior engineers, a software coder, and a machine technician. They worked out of a side lab, testing simple robots that could sort, stack, and pack items. The robots weren't fancy, but they were smart, reliable, and cheap. One of them, called Tiny Tom, could sort up to 600 items per hour using a basic camera and a few lines of smart code. The prototype cost less than 1/10 of a regular industrial robot soon. They began testing Project Spark in real businesses, small warehouses, a bakery, a hardware store, and even a family-run bookshop. Everywhere they tested it, people were amazed. Owners said things like, "We've never been able to afford something like this," or "This saves us hours every week." Marcus visited each location personally, shook hands, answered questions, and even helped install the systems. One day, at a small warehouse owned by an elderly man named Mr. Dillard, Marcus stayed late helping connect the robot to an old control panel. Mr. Dillard looked at Marcus and said, "You know, I've run this place for 40 years. Thought we were done. but this little machine might give us another 10. That night, Marcus sat in his car, holding back tears. He wasn't just building machines anymore. He was building futures. 1 year after the launch of Project Spark, Grayson Robotics announced a new division focused entirely on affordable automation. Led by Marcus, the program became a national success. Small businesses across the country signed up. Schools invited Marcus to speak about innovation. His face appeared on magazine covers, not because he was famous, but because he represented something rare in the tech world, a person with no formal background who had changed the game simply. By thinking differently, despite the fame, Marcus remained the same. He still visited his mom every Sunday. He still walked around the Grayson factory talking to workers. He still carried his black notebook, now old and filled with pages, but still full of new ideas. One morning, found himself back at the original factory floor, the same place where it all began. Stood in front of the conveyor belt he had fixed that first day. It was still running, still smooth. A young engineer walked by and said, "Hey, isn't that the belt you saved back in the day?" Marcus smiled. "Yeah, that's the one." The engineer laughed. People still talk about that like it was magic." Marcus looked at the machine, then at the engineer. "It wasn't magic," he said. "It was just ... paying attention." With that, he walked away, no spotlight, no cameras, just a quiet man who had once been invisible and had now become the very heart of innovation. His story became a symbol, a reminder that talent can live in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the smartest person in the room is the one you didn't notice at first.